Chris Walken, you've made, in this last couple of years, these two enormously successful films. I happen to have seen, you used to be a singer and dancer, didn't you?
I did. That's a long time ago. You must be old.
4 hours. That's how long they waited to call for help after Natalie Wood disappeared. Why did Robert Wagner stop the captain from searching? Why did his story keep changing? And why did he refuse to cooperate when the case was reopened? After 42 years of secrets and lies, new evidence is finally revealing what really happened on the yacht Splendor. The mystery that haunted Hollywood may finally be solved. Natalie Wood's story is one of talent and heartbreak. She was born on July 20th, 1938, in San Francisco. Her real name was Natalia Nikolaevna Zakharenko. Her parents, Maria and Nikolai, were Russian immigrants who had escaped a tough life. They struggled when they came to America, but Maria dreamed of her daughter becoming a big star. Natalie's interest in acting started in an unusual way. In 1942, when she was just 4 years old, her family moved to Santa Rosa and bought a house. During a local movie shoot, she caught the attention of film crew, and they wanted her in the shoot. Her role was tiny, but it didn't go unnoticed. Soon after, she appeared in another film, Happy Land, for a brief 15-second scene. Though these roles were small, they caught the attention of the director, Irving Pichel. He saw something special in Natalie. Pichel stayed in touch with her family for 2 years, always keeping an eye out for her next big opportunity. One day, Pichel called Natalie's mother with exciting news. There was a role coming up, and he thought Natalie would be perfect for it. He suggested they bring her to Los Angeles for a screen test. Natalie's mother, Maria, didn't waste a second. She packed up the entire family and moved them to Los Angeles, determined to make Natalie a star. Her father didn't agree with this bold move, but Maria's ambition won out. She believed Natalie was destined for greatness, and nothing would stop her. At just 7 years old, Natalie landed the role. She played a German orphan in Tomorrow is Forever, 1946, starring alongside Orson Welles and Claudette Colbert. The role wasn't easy. In one emotional scene, Natalie had to cry on cue, but she couldn't manage it. Her mother, in a shocking moment, tore apart a butterfly right in front of her to make her cry. The tears worked, but it was a tough experience for such a young child. Orson Welles later said Natalie was so talented, it was almost scary. She doesn't act from the script, he said. She acts from the heart. Natalie continued to work with Pichel, starring in his movie, The Bride Wore Boots. After that, she joined 20th Century Fox, where she played Jean Tierney's daughter in The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, 1947. By then, Natalie was proving she wasn't just a cute face. She was a natural talent who could hold her own alongside big stars. Natalie Wood's big moment as a child star came with Miracle on 34th Street, 1947. She played a smart but skeptical little girl who didn't believe in Santa Claus until she met a kind department store employee, played by Edmund Gwenn, who just might be the real Santa. The movie was a huge success and became a Christmas classic, loved by audiences everywhere. After the film, Natalie became one of the most famous child stars in Hollywood. She was so popular that Macy's invited her to join their Thanksgiving Day parade, an honor very few ever received. Being a child star wasn't easy, though. Natalie had to balance her work with school. Because she was a minor, she studied on the studio lot wherever she was filming. California law said she had to spend at least 3 hours a day in the classroom until she turned 18. Natalie was a straight A student, especially good at math. Director Joseph L. Mankiewicz, who worked with her on The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, 1947, called her the smartest kid he'd ever met. But Natalie felt bad about it. She knew the film crew had to wait for her to finish school every day. As soon as her teacher let her go, she would run straight to the set, not wanting to waste a second. Her life might sound glamorous, but it came with a price. At just 8 years old, Natalie had to work long hours, sometimes 12-hour days, 6 days a week. The emotional and physical stress was intense, but no one seemed to care. All that mattered was getting the perfect performance for the camera. Natalie Wood's life changed forever when she starred in Rebel Without a Cause in 1955. The movie was about teenage rebellion, and it connected deeply with audiences. Critics loved how she made Judy's emotions feel real. Getting this role wasn't easy for Natalie. The director, Nicholas Ray, didn't think she could play a rebellious teenager because she had always acted in innocent, childlike roles before. He tried other actresses like Debbie Reynolds, but Natalie refused to give up. She even told him she'd run away from home and become a real delinquent if he didn't let her audition. When Natalie finally got the part, she worked hard to prepare. But behind the scenes, things got complicated. She was just 16 when she started a relationship with the 43-year-old director, Ray. At the time, it was seen as part of her dedication to the role, but later she described it as painful and wrong. The filming of Rebel Without a Cause wasn't smooth. Natalie and her co-star, Dennis Hopper, were in a car accident during production. Although she wasn't seriously hurt, it added to the movie's edgy reputation. Then, just after filming ended, tragedy struck. James Dean, the film's lead actor, died in a car crash. His death shocked everyone and made the movie even more emotional when it was released. Even with all this drama, Natalie's performance stood out. She brought depth and emotion to Judy, which impressed both audiences and critics. At the 1956 Oscars, she was nominated for Best Supporting Actress. Although she didn't win, it was a big moment for her career, showing she had what it took to be a Hollywood star. That same year, she won a Golden Globe as the most promising newcomer. This success opened doors for Natalie. In 1961, she starred in two huge movies, Splendor in the Grass and West Side Story. In Splendor in the Grass, she played Deanie, a young woman dealing with heartbreak and mental illness. Natalie worked hard for this role, even visiting mental hospitals to study patients. One scene, where she has a breakdown in a bathtub, was so emotional it was filmed in just one take. The movie was a hit and earned her another Oscar nomination for Best Actress. Right after that, Natalie starred as Maria in West Side Story. She played a Puerto Rican girl in love with someone from a rival gang. Even though her singing voice was dubbed by someone else, her acting was praised. The movie became a massive success, winning 10 Oscars, including Best Picture. These two movies made Natalie one of the biggest stars in Hollywood at just 23 years old. In 1963, Natalie starred in Love with the Proper Stranger, where she played a woman dealing with an unplanned pregnancy. The movie was bold for its time because it talked about topics like abortion, which were rarely shown in Hollywood back then. One scene, where Natalie's character goes through a scary abortion attempt, was improvised and incredibly emotional. Her performance earned her a third Oscar nomination. Even with all this success, Natalie struggled with the roles she was offered. She didn't want to be typecast in the same kinds of parts, so in 1966, she paid $175,000 to cancel her contract with Warner Brothers. She rejected big movies like Barefoot in the Park because they didn't challenge her as an actress. But this decision also hurt her career, as it made her less visible in Hollywood. The pressure of trying to control her career and her personal struggles became too much. In 1966, Natalie attempted to end herself by overdosing on sleeping pills, but luckily survived. After this, she took a break from acting to focus on her mental health. She also fired her entire team and started fresh. Natalie Wood's career saw a major turning point when she starred in Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice in 1969. After stepping away from filmmaking for 3 years, her return was nothing short of remarkable. The film, released on September 17, 1969, became an instant hit, earning $31.9 million from a budget of just $2 million. Natalie played Carol Sanders, a bold and modern character exploring open relationships. Her performance earned her a Golden Globe nomination for Best Actress in a Motion Picture. In the 1970s, Natalie shifted from big movies to TV roles. She wanted to spend more time with her family, but it also fit with how entertainment was changing. Her first big TV project was The Affair, which aired in 1973. She played a married woman in an affair, and it became a huge hit, watched by about 30 million people. In 1979, she starred in the miniseries From Here to Eternity, It was a big deal at the time, airing over 5 nights, and watched by 39 million people each night. Natalie's performance won her a Golden Globe for Best Actress, which was her first win after 7 nominations. She also played Maggie in a TV version of Cat on a Hot Tin Roof in 1976. Critics loved her take on the role, which had famously been played by Elizabeth Taylor before. This move to TV happened during a personal turning point in her life. She remarried Robert Wagner in 1972 after being divorced from him for 10 years. Focusing on her family meant she acted less, and she only did 4 movies during the entire 1970s. This was a big change from how busy she had been in the 1950s and 1960s. Her last movie was Brainstorm, a sci-fi thriller filmed in 1981. Natalie played a scientist working on a machine that could record human experiences. The movie was using new and exciting technology, like 70mm film, to make the scenes look more realistic. Sadly, while filming, Natalie died on November 29, 1981, at just 43 years old. She had finished most of her scenes, but production stopped because of her death. The studio even tried to cancel the movie for insurance money, but the director fought hard to finish it as a tribute to her. They used creative editing, body doubles, and even had Natalie's sister stand in for a shot. The movie finally came out on September 30th, 1983, almost 2 years later. Even though it didn't make a lot of money at the box office, people praised it for its special effects and ideas. Over time, Brainstorm became a cult favorite and is now seen as an important movie in the history of science fiction. Natalie Wood's first marriage to Robert Wagner felt like a Hollywood dream. She first met Wagner when she was just 10 years old. Back then, she told her mother she wanted to marry him one day. Years later, when Natalie turned 18, they started dating. Their romance moved fast, and they got married on December 28, 1957, in Scottsdale, Arizona. Everyone saw them as the perfect couple, calling them Hollywood's golden pair. But behind all the glamour, things weren't so perfect. Natalie's acting career was taking off, while Robert's career wasn't doing as well. This created tension between them. In 1961, their marriage suddenly ended. Some stories say Natalie found Robert in a situation with another man at their home. At that time, something like that would have been a huge scandal in Hollywood. They announced their separation on June 20th, 1961, and their divorce was final on April 27th, 1962. After the split, Natalie began dating Warren Beatty. Their relationship was messy and full of fights, which Natalie later described as chaotic. Meanwhile, Robert struggled to deal with the breakup and left Los Angeles to spend time in Europe. Natalie's second marriage was to Richard Gregson, a British producer. They met through their friend, actor Robert Redford. After dating for 3 years, they got married on May 30th, 1969, in a Russian Orthodox church in California. Things seemed good at first. Natalie, who had been dealing with mental health issues after her first marriage and the breakup with Beatty, felt more stable with Richard. In September 1970, they had a daughter, Natasha, which made Natalie very happy. But their happiness didn't last. Natalie became so focused on being a mom that Richard felt left out. This distance between them led Richard to have an affair with Natalie's secretary. When Natalie found out, she was furious. She kicked him out and filed for divorce on August 4th, 1971. Their marriage officially ended on April 12th, 1972. Meanwhile, Natalie and Robert Wagner's story didn't end with their divorce. After nearly 10 years apart, they found their way back to each other. Both had remarried during that time. Robert to actress Marion Marshall and Natalie to Richard Gregson. But by early 1972, both were single again. In January, they reconnected and fell back in love almost instantly. Their relationship moved quickly again, and even Natalie was surprised. She admitted that friends told her to slow down, but she felt that both she and Robert had grown during their time apart. She believed Robert had finally become the man she had always wanted him to be. On July 16, 1972, they got married again. This time, they chose a yacht, the Ramblin' Rose, anchored off Malibu, as the setting for their wedding. It was romantic and special. Their second marriage seemed stronger than the first. They had a daughter, Courtney, in 1974, and Robert became a loving stepfather to Natasha. But their happiness was tragically cut short in 1981, when Natalie died under mysterious circumstances at sea. On November 28, 1981, Natalie Wood went on what should have been a relaxing trip to Catalina Island. She boarded the yacht Splendor with her husband Robert Wagner, her co-star Christopher Walken, and the yacht's captain, Dennis Davern. They had originally planned to bring more friends, but in the end, it was just the four of them. The trip started off peacefully. On Friday, November 27th, they left Marina del Rey and anchored at Avalon, a small town on the island. Natalie, Robert, and Christopher spent time ashore, shopping and having drinks, while Dennis stayed on the boat. The next day, Wagner decided to move the yacht to a quieter spot called Two Harbors because of bad weather. It was cold, windy, and rainy, with rough waters, far from ideal for a pleasant weekend. That evening, the group went to Doug's Harbor Reef, the only restaurant in Two Harbors. They arrived around 5 p.m. and started drinking heavily. They had champagne, wine, and cocktails, more than enough to leave everyone drunk. By the time they left at 10:30 p.m., the restaurant staff could tell they were intoxicated. 11:05 p.m. He even remembered Wagner shouting, "Get off my fucking boat!" Then everything went quiet. At almost the same time, Marilyn Wayne, a woman on a nearby boat, said she heard a woman crying for help. The voice called out, "Help me! Someone please help me! I'm drowning!" several times over about 15 minutes. Davern of dark water, which made her disappearance even stranger. She had openly said, "I'm afraid of water that is dark." The idea of her leaving the yacht at night, voluntarily, doesn't make sense to many people. The search for Natalie started hours late, made until 1:30 a.m. The Coast Guard wasn't contacted until 3:30 a.m. That's more than 4 hours after she disappeared. Roger Smith, the rescue boat captain who found her body, said he wasn't even told about her disappearance until 5:11 a.m., almost 6 hours later. The autopsy showed she had bruises on her arms and legs and a scrape on her cheek. One bruise on her arm looked like a defense wound, making some people think she struggled with someone before falling into the water. She also had a blood alcohol level of 0.14%, along with traces of motion sickness pills and painkillers. She and her husband, Robert Wagner, having a terrible argument that night. This wasn't just a small fight. He described it as intense and full of tension. The police didn't take this lightly. Lieutenant John Corina, who led the case, said they'd received tips from several sources, and they all seemed credible. On top of that, forensic technology had improved a lot since 1981, giving investigators hope that they might uncover new clues. To get Payne and his girlfriend Marilyn Wayne, they had been on a boat near the Splendor that night. They said they heard a woman shouting, "Help me! Someone please help me!" around midnight. The cries came from the direction of the Splendor. They also heard a man's voice, sounding drunk, replying, "Okay, honey, we'll get," frightened, and saying Wagner was going to kill her. She even stayed the night at his house. This memory, if true, pointed to a history of problems between Natalie and Wagner that no one had talked about before. In August 2012, something big happened. Natalie Wood's death certificate was changed. For years, her cause of death was listed as accidental drowning, but now it was updated to drowning and other undetermined factors. This change wasn't random. It came after months of investigation and reflected the growing belief that there was more to her death than just an accident. He said they had been drinking a lot, and he got into a big fight with Christopher Walken about Wood's career. Wagner even admitted he lost his temper, saying, "I picked up a wine bottle, slammed it on the table, and broke it into pieces." This was very different from his earlier version of the night. It was closer to what Captain Dennis Davern, the yacht's captain, had been saying for years. One of the most suspicious things about Wagner is that he didn't cooperate with the investigation after the case was reopened. In 2018, Lieutenant John Corina from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department said, "I haven't seen him tell the details that match all the other witnesses. His version of events just doesn't add up." Because of this, Wagner was officially named a person of interest in Natalie Wood's death on February 1st, 2018, almost 37 years after it happened. And Christopher Walken, who was on the yacht that night, has stayed mostly quiet about what happened. But in a 2012 Playboy interview, he shared his thoughts. Walken said, "What happened that night only she knows because she was alone. She had gone to bed before us, and her room was at the back. A dinghy was bouncing against the side of the boat, and I think she went out to move it. In fact, they had to cut a swimming scene from Brainstorm. She was probably half asleep and wearing a coat." Walken's statement offered some insight, but he refused to talk in detail about the night. Between Wagner's changing stories, his lack of cooperation, and the unanswered questions, Natalie Wood's death has remained a mystery for decades. People still wonder what really happened that night. Meanwhile, in 2021, Natalie Wood's sister Lana shared a disturbing secret in her book. She said that back in 1955, when Natalie was just 16, famous actor Kirk Douglas hurt her at a Hollywood hotel. Their mom had set up a meeting with Douglas, hoping he could help Natalie's acting career since he was a big star at the time. But something went very wrong that night. When Natalie came back to the car, she was really upset. Her clothes were messy, and she whispered urgently with their mom. Lana, who was just a little kid then, knew something bad had happened, but didn't understand what. It wasn't until years later that Natalie told Lana the truth. "He hurt me, Lana," she said, words that showed how much pain she'd been carrying. This story reminds us that even famous, successful people can hide deep hurts from their past. It also shows how Hollywood wasn't always the glamorous place it seemed to be, especially for young actors trying to make it in the business.